Here we are. I should mention before we start talking about Ye Old Mariner that I was glad that there was one thing I forgot to mention, which will sound racist when I say it. And I don't know to what degree it was racist when it was devised, so I apologize, I don't know. But I did tell you that Rime of the Ancient Mariner was going to be long, and so seemingly some of you were prepared for that. And that Lord Byron's Don Juan was long as well. And I think I even said it last time. I kept saying Don Juan, Don Juan. It just sounded like, does he really not know how to say Juan? That's actually how he wanted it pronounced for the entirety of the... I don't know if it was meant as a joke. It says after the British fashion of the time. So I don't know if that's like... if it's just a, white people can't say Spanish names thing, or if he knew how to say it. I mean, he knew how to actually say it. I don't know if he meant that as a joke. Based on the text of it, I have to think he did. Not as like he was making fun of people who didn't know how to pronounce it properly. But then he makes all the rhymes that are in there a rhyme based on Juan, not on Juan. It's a subtle difference. But, a lot of people read Kubla Khan. I don't think a whole lot of people got it. Maybe you did. There's so much more to Kubla Khan than what meets the eye. Let's see. So... Not many people wrote about Don Juan, so we'll probably make that the one we talk about last, even though it's... I also forgot to mention to you guys that it's very funny, and it's supposed to be. Rime of the Ancient Mariner is more like, I don't know, like assaultingly dire. I don't even know if that makes sense. Like, I feel like I'm being assaulted by that story and its seriousness, and the way he's talking about it. Like, I don't know, it's weird, but like Don Juan is almost, it's ridiculously silly, like the entirety of the text, which we will get to. Okay, I already have the book. Was that my computer that made that noise or one of y'all's?
Mine.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure my computer wasn't about to restart or anything. So what do we want to talk about first?
Is it Mariner or
Mariner? Yes.
Mariner? That's what you want to talk about first.
Yes. I mean, you're right.
I'm wondering if I should, though. 'Cause I feel like Mariner is kind of... It's not really straightforward. Really, none of the stuff this week was straightforward, with the exception of Don Juan. That was pretty straightforward. If you knew it was funny. Now we'll start with Kubla Khan. Sorry, apologize for making it seem like I was going to give you a choice and then I didn't. 1680 is Kubla Khan in the book. I'll pull up Kubla Khan on here as well. Oh, look, there it is. Oh, you don't have access to it. That would help. In Xanadu did Kubla Khan a stately pleasure dome decree. I always find it strange how many people mention the first couple lines all the time. Almost as though people are like, I've only got so much time. Let me just write about the first few lines of this. Make it a little bigger. Oh, it goes over to that side. Okay, well, I don't know if I've... Can we see? Can we see Kubla Khan? Okay. I think it's important. How about we read it first, then I'll go back and talk about the... Did anybody happen to read the intro to it in the textbook?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about that after I just do a reading of it. Man, how would I read this? I don't know. We'll do it. Because it's hard to get out of my head. There was a movie called Citizen Kane like some guy you watch that movie, like he reads it out loud and it's very like roar, but I don't have that. It's not necessarily to me a roaring type of. So here we go.
So Citizen Kane actually spoke this poem?
Parts of it, yeah. In fact, the main character of that movie who had a big giant piece of property with a mansion on it that he called Xanadu, was called after this poem. And hold on. Okay. I think I got it. How to get the voice right. In Xanadu did Kubla Khan a stately pleasure dome decree, where Alf, the sacred river, ran through caverns measureless to man down to a sunless sea. So twice 5 miles of fertile ground with walls and towers were girdled round, and there were gardens bright with sinuous rills where blossomed many an incense-bearing tree. And here were forests ancient as the hills, enfolding sunny spots of greenery.
Where?
Okay, so it's like a mystical location, right? It sounds like,
Yeah.
it's like we're getting caverns measureless to man. I mean, it sounds like, if there were ever a Minecraft world that were actually interesting. They're all procedurally generated, so there's just an endless landscape of the same. But if there was like a sea and like rolling waters or something, and then like the caverns could like then go directly down to, I don't know, like it's like impossible landscape basically. And it says twice 5 miles of fertile ground with walls and towers were girdled around. I think that when he says twice 5 miles, I think he literally means like a 5 by 5. I don't know if he actually means 10 square miles. I think he means like 25 square miles, like 5 miles this way, 5 miles that way. And we have the Alf, the sacred river, so it's a very like well-known, I guess, river. And he says like there's very bright gardens. There's like lots of walls and towers. Like there's a legit built wall that's like beautiful and like goes around this entire place. The trees aren't just trees, right? They're incense-bearing. You ever heard of a mimosa tree? That was pretty like pink and white, almost spidery looking flowers.
I have those in my yard.
They smell phenomenal whenever they bloom, right? They have that nice smell when you go to the flowery. You're like, wow. But they're kind of like a fern tree. But basically all the trees there would have that incense-bearing quality. Like they would smell very strong and beautiful. And here were forests ancient as the hills, so big, huge, old forests enfolding sunny spots of greenery. So yes, there were deep, dark forests, but also sunny places where you could enjoy like the view and stuff. So it's a very like, I'm thinking almost like Switzerland-y type levels of mountains, but also like goes down to the sea at the same time. And he keeps talking about it. He says, but oh, that deep romantic chasm which slanted down the green hill athwart a cedarn cover. A savage place, as holy and enchanted as air beneath a waning moon was haunted by a woman wailing for her demon lover. Gives you that mystic quality, doesn't it? And from this chasm with ceaseless turmoil seething as if this earth in fast thick pants were breathing, a mighty fountain momently was forced, amid whose swift half-intermitted burst huge fragments vaulted like rebounding hail, or chaffy grain beneath the thresher's fell, and mid these dancing rocks at once and ever it flung up momently the sacred river. 5 miles meandering with a mazy motion through a wooden dale the sacred river ran. They reached the caverns measureless to man and sank in tumult to a lifeless ocean. And mid this tumult Kubla heard from afar ancestral voices prophesying war. Oh, so what's happening here? So we've got all the stuff we just talked about. And he says, it's cedarn cover, so there's like tall cedar trees, old tall cedar trees. They're very beautiful, like the bark of those trees, and like the wood is very strong. The way I'm reading this, I'm spitting all over my screen. Paul, I don't think it's making it to you guys. It just the splash zone is right there. And he says it's a savage place. So this is a place that's not fully tamed. Has a wall around it, yes, but not fully tamed. And this is an interesting line that people sometimes will focus on, but I don't think anybody did, at least not in the original posts last night. It says, as holy and enchanted as ever beneath a waning moon was haunted by woman wailing for her demon lover. So imagine like a scene where like underneath a waning, like the moon is going, and a woman is like, oh, my demon lover. Like who wails for a demon lover? It just feels like something's off and magical and weird, mystical. And from this chasm with ceaseless turmoil seething. And I think it's the chasm, of course, created by the river. Hush. Stop talking. And from this chasm with ceaseless turmoil seething. So he's really trying to get this energy imbued with it with ceaseless turmoil, and it's seething. So it's like he's giving it an emotion. As if this earth in fast, thick pants were breathing. So like the earth itself, he's personifying it. It's like it's... Stop! Shut up!
Shut up.
Did you not hear me? Okay. A mighty fountain momently was forced. So he says, in the chasm, so there's a moment where the river is going so fast that it actually goes up for a moment. Like it's going so fast down, and then it like hits a ramp or something, I don't know, like, and it goes up, but then it goes back down. So it's very hard for a river to go upwards, I would assume. It usually just goes down. Almost all rivers rivers are created by gravity. They find the easiest path downward. And he said, amid whose swift, half-intermitted bursts, huge fragments vaulted like rebounding hail. So it's actually taking like fragments of like rock and things and throwing them up in the air as well. And it says, kind of like a chaffy grain beneath a thresher's flail. So like if somebody's, I don't know how like that what that means. Like like a thresher is flailing, like but it's like seedlings just shooting up and down. And he says, amid these dancing rocks and once ever it flung up momently the sacred river. So it is a 5-mile-long river, meandering with amazing motion through Wooden Dale, the sacred river ran. And then it reached these caverns that are measureless to man. So we can't even know how deep they are. They're that deep. They're measureless. And they sank in tumult to a lifeless ocean. So the ocean is just down there ready to accept them. And so here we have a prophecy of war, right? Oh, okay, so we have this magical land that is savage. We have war prophesied. So this kind of is an interesting landscape for a war, right? If war came first to the walls and then to the savage place, what would that war be like? I don't know. The poem is going to lead us to like, what does the war mean? What are we getting toward? And he says, the shadow of the dome of pleasure floated midway on the waves, where was heard the mingled measure from the fountain in the caves. It was a miracle of rare device, a sunny pleasure dome with caves of ice. Okay. So, do we have let's see, do I still have that drawing? Let me see. Don't know. Let me see. Britlet 2, Kubla Khan. I got some images here, like this massive castle, but like, see, like it's gonna have to be super high up.
Even higher?
It doesn't look like this necessarily. This isn't necessarily the pleasure dome, but it's gonna be a massive, like, almost dome-like structure. I would assume more like, it's more like say a Taj Mahal-like thing where it's beautiful and rounded and almost impossible geometry. But it's high up too. So the ocean's down below and the sun is behind it, and it's so high up that it casts downward. The shadow from the dome does onto the ocean. You can see it. It's that big that the sun casts behind it. You can see it on the ocean out there.
You're describing the dome from SpongeBob when they performed at the temple.
Okay. I don't recall. There was a point at which I stopped watching SpongeBob when my daughter got older, and I was thankful for that moment. So I can't recall. Oh, my little daughter, she's trying to watch it now, though, and I don't want her to. Let me see. What do we got here? Oh, and somebody's drawn this as well. See how high up it is, and like it goes down a mountain. Again, high, very high pleasure dome. Almost impossible downwardness. Like, that's kind of more, I guess, what I would imagine. And the landscape itself almost seems impossible. And so it's sunny, yet also there's ice. Like, everything seems basically impossible. And even out in the ocean, you could hear the river running through those caves and caverns and things. It was that loud and forceful. It's like, so basically he's once again just kind of reiterating, like, in the prophecy of war, that's what we're hearing about, is this, this place, war. Okay, so what's that war going to be like? Let's see. And he says, seems kind of like a change of gears here. He says, a damsel with a dulcimer in a vision once I saw. It was an Abyssinian maid, and on her dulcimer she played, singing of Mount Abora. Could I revive within me her symphony and song, to such a deep delight 'twould win me, that with music loud and long I would build that dome in air, that sunny dome, those caves of ice. And all who heard them should see them, and all who heard should see them there, and all should cry, beware, beware. His flashing eyes, his floating hair, weave a circle round him thrice, and close your eyes with holy dread, for he on honey-dew hath fed, and drunk the milk of paradise. So, okay, what about the war? Where did the war go? It was supposed to be a war, right? Prophesying war. War, it's coming. Nothing. What we get instead is he says, I once saw this damsel with a dulcimer. It's like an instrument, stringed instrument, and she's playing. It was an Abyssinian maiden. On her dulcimer she played, singing out a bore. It sounds to me like he's describing his specific muse, the one that was bringing this poetry to him and like letting him construct. And then he says, could I revive within me her symphony and song? So like she was singing and she was his muse, and he can't remember what the muse was saying. He says it would win me to a deep delight, and I would sing with music loud and long, and I would talk to you all about this dome, and I would rebuild it, and those caves of ice, and all who would hear my words that came from the muse would be like, well, beware, beware, look at that dome. Look what he's constructed, if I could but remember what the muse had told me. And then he says, his flashing eyes, so he starts doing like almost like a spiritual, mystical witchcraft ritual here. Weave a circle round him thrice, close your eyes with holy dread. And he basically in like a sort of respect and reverence. Like I'm assuming like if you went and got like your fortune read by a fortune teller or something, there would be like this almost grave sense of importance to the room. Like that's what he's doing there. He's like, weave a circle round him thrice, close your eyes with holy dread, almost like a prayer. He says, for he on honeydew hath fed and drunk the milk of paradise. Played to him by the damsel on her dulcimer, the muse that he had. So what does that mean?
What part?
All that ended. Like we were told a war is coming.
Well, he forgot about it, right?
He fell in love.
Making the play?
Yeah, he forgot it. Like, he starts this great poem brought to him by his muse. And he's starting it, and he gets to the part about the war, and then he kind of, what was the rest? I don't remember. But if you heard it.
He was talking about like how like something got lost or something.
Yeah, his memory just went away.
Yeah.
It's gone. So he says, but if you had heard the rest of the poem, you would be like, oh my gosh, because it was amazing. I can't remember what it was, but if you heard it, you would be like, oh my, that's the greatest thing that ever existed. And I'd be like, yeah, well, yeah. But I don't remember what that is. So this is what we have. It'd be great if. And now here's the story behind it to explain like what the hell, like right? Because like why don't you just give us the damn poem? Like why not? Why are you giving us this whole song and dance about? If I had the poem, I would, but I can't, so I won't. So this says. In the summer of the year 1797, when Coleridge is, let's see how old he is then. By the way, Coleridge and Wordsworth were good friends. They actually lived, I think, like a couple of miles from each other at one time. In fact, Rime of the Ancient Mariner, Wordsworth gave Coleridge the idea for shooting the albatross, which kind of is the whole center around which the whole story. He says, how about he shoots an albatross? So they were doing it together for a time, and then Coleridge sort of took it over. But in 1797, when Coleridge was 27 years old, it says, the author then in ill health. And Wordsworth is always in great health. He was doing fine. Coleridge was always in bad health and constantly being prescribed different kinds of drugs, to which he was mostly overtaking. And it says, then at this point, he was in ill health at the age of 27. He retired to a lonely farmhouse between Porlock and Linton, on the Exmoor confines of Somerset and Devonshire. In consequence of a slight indisposition, an anodyne had been prescribed, from the effect of which he fell asleep in his chair at the moment that he was reading the following sentence, or words of the same substance, and purchased pilgrims. So he'd been prescribed a drug, he's high, and he reads this sentence and then falls asleep. Here the concubla commanded a palace to be built and a stately garden thereunto, and thus 10 miles of fertile ground. And he falls asleep. The author continued for about 3 hours in a profound sleep. at least of the external senses, in terms of like 3 hours of, from the outside, it looked like 3 hours of sleep. During which time he has the most vivid confidence. He's sure of this, that he could not have composed less than, say, 200 to 300 lines of poetry in his head, and he had it like all like there. It was all there, 200 to 300 lines. What we have here is like 50. And really, I mean, we don't have 50. We have like 30, and then he starts explaining that he doesn't have the rest. If that can indeed be called composition, in which all the images rose up before him as things with a parallel production of the corresponding expressions without any sensation or consciousness of effort. It just sort of all came to him. And it says, on awakening, he appeared to himself to have a distinct recollection of the whole, and he took his pen, his ink, his paper, and he instantly and eagerly wrote down the lines that are here preserved. So he starts immediately, he's like, you know, you wake up from a dream, you ever had like something you want to write down, you're like, oh my gosh, I need to write this down. And so he's like, oh my gosh, I gotta write this down, quick, go. So one of the most important moments for a writer is when he has that inspiration, he's writing it down. So this is what he's doing. And in this moment, somebody knocked on his door and said, excuse me, sir, I have some business from Porlock. And he's like, yes, okay. That's the dude in the house. And the guy detained him about an hour, talking about business and business expenses and finances and things. And on his return to his room, poor Coleridge, he found that he'd forgotten all but like a few lines. He had some vague, dim recollection of the general nature of the vision, but he forgot everything but like 8 to 10 lines. So what we have are like those few lines that we remember, or that he remembers, filled in with some of the extra holes, and then an explanation that if I had the whole thing, it would be awesome. That's what we got. I think that's hilarious. I'm not even sure he ever actually had the dream.
It's all made up.
I very much think that it's completely and totally possible that this is all a sham. Like, this is all fake. I'd like to call your attention to, I don't know if he's aware of this, but come on, I gotta have it. Hold on. Must be in a different folder. I don't think this will be able to be in the oh, come on. Give me a second. Okay. I think this is it. So, do I have sound here? I don't want you to think that because I did not want you watching Gulliver's Travels, the movie with Jack Black, that I have a blanket disapproval of Jack Black. I don't. It's just that particular movie in terms of Gulliver's Travels. I'm just like, that's blasphemy. However, while I'm not sure if Jack Black has an awareness of this poem, I believe he recaptures the spirit of the poem. You have to listen to the words closely. But here is a song by Jack Black and I think his buddy Kyle here, called Tenacious D, that we're going to listen to and then talk about its implications to the poem. I think there might be some swear words. I apologize. I don't know if they directly stole the idea from the poem or if they've read the poem at all. That should be kind of nice to meet Jack Black and ask him. Huh? Right. Like, so I mean, it's the exact same idea of Coleridge, as Coleridge's sounds more, I don't know, professional. Of course, Jack Black's being silly. So we know that it's an absolute joke that they ever did any of that stuff. Like they met a devil on the road and played a song. But we're told, yeah, this song doesn't actually sound anything like the song that was the greatest song in the world. This is merely a tribute to that song. And this is exactly what this poem is. It's a tribute to the great poem that he absolutely wrote in his mind, but he can't remember it because it was taken because there was a guy who came and knocked on his door, and for some stupid reason he let him in. Like, why would you let anybody in that scenario? That's why I don't even believe this story. Like, if you're like, I'm writing one of the greatest poems of my life, and some guy comes knocking, you're like, go the F away. like I wouldn't even care about the language, even if it was like the 1700s or 1800s. I'd be like, go. This is important. This is my life's work. And he's like, well, they came all this way. I better answer. And so he goes, and like the guy says, you busy? And he's like, no. I don't know. Maybe he's just so. But the funny thing is, he's not introverted, because. So I was thinking maybe like an introvert or somebody who didn't want to like step on toes would be like, I'll go answer the door just because I don't want them to like wonder like what's wrong with me. This is back in the day too, when they didn't have people coming to the door all the time selling things. So if you didn't go to the door, it wouldn't be like, oh, okay, well they know I'm a seller or something. It's like somebody walked all the way to your house to get there. You probably should open it, but still, I don't know. I just don't believe this whole story. I don't believe this. Did you enjoy this song? What was it? What was that movie? Was it Tamatoa? You know who Tamatoa is? No? You don't know who Tamatoa is? Tamatoa hasn't always been this grand. I was a little crab once. Nobody?
Oh, yeah.
He was on, Moana. So, I've had that moment where I was like, did you like the song? But honestly, it's weird. I hate this song more every time I hear it because it has that twangy 90s sound. And I don't know, I'm getting to where I don't want that anymore. I don't like that in music. But the idea, I think that while he's trying to dress it up more and make it seem like this is legit, I think that could be the joke. That like the fact that he's trying to like pull this over on us is part of like the joy of it. Because the reason I want to start with this one is can we now move into Rime of the Ancient Mariner. I feel like he's sort of doing a similar thing. Like he doesn't necessarily say it's true. This one sounds like he's being legit and saying this is what happened. But Rime of the Ancient Mariner kind of functions in the same storytelling principle, doesn't it? Where you have the whole story we're given that supposedly happened in this universe is this old guy goes up to some dude who's about to go to a wedding and grabs him and he says, "You must listen to my tale." Let's go back to the beginning. I always like to read at least the beginning to establish what I think the voice of the mariner is. I've wondered if he even like means any of this stuff, or this is all just like a ploy. I don't even know. One of the things I was going to say is that a minute ago was that Coleridge, when I said that he wasn't an introvert, he was very much an opportunist. He's well known for like publishing poems just so he could make money, because he always needed he had health related problems. He needed money, so he was known for plagiarizing other people's poems in large sections and then saying they were his. So that was one of the things that he would just do. But on top of that, he ended up finding a way to eke out a living a little bit later, because the Oxford and Cambridge would not admit women. At the time, they did not admit women. And so if a woman wanted like a university education, she didn't really have the option. So one of the things Coleridge would do is he would go to like the rich women of a town, and he would do these long lectures on various subjects and on poetry. And because he didn't care that women couldn't go to university, he was like, I see an opportunity to make some money, I'm gonna do it. And he was like, they just want to hear poetry, so he didn't care. So that was another thing. He would say he loved talking at length and giving lectures and things. So it wasn't a thing where like that guy comes to his door and he's not afraid to tell the guy go away. That's why I don't believe that story. But Ancient Mariner here. Did y'all notice there's a bunch of like weird spellings of things? when y'all were reading it. Like it had like the kind of mystical spelling quality, a little bit of it. It wasn't as pronounced. Wordsworth. Did y'all read the edition in the textbook where it's got all those weird notes in the margins?
Yes.
So the weird notes in the margins weren't in there originally. They were added because it wasn't selling very well, and Wordsworth said, why don't you give it some like footnotes and stuff to kind of beef it up? And so he added all these notes in there, sometimes that add information entirely that wasn't in there before. Like, you'll notice sometimes like it was like a 4-line thing, and you would read the note, and you're like, how did he get that out of that? Like, there's literally no way you could have gotten it out of that. He's literally adding that information to the text. It's just so weird. Like, I think one of the parts was like, something about like the wind. Oh yeah, it says, and some in dreams assured were of the spirit that plagued us so. 9 fathom deep he had followed us from the land of mist and snow. That's all we have. But the note says, a spirit had followed them, one of the invisible inhabitants of this planet, neither departed souls nor angels, concerning whom the learned Jew Josephus and the Platonic Constantinopolitan Michael Psellus may be consulted. They are very numerous, and there is no climate or element without one or more. Like, was I supposed to get that out of it, or is he adding information like, here's what this is what I meant by this? It's so weird. It's like, it's not just like, so you didn't even intend that to be published with it. We were supposed to, like, I guess, know that, guess it. He feels like ghosts exists, and like, here's why. Like, if we look back at these philosophers, it's weird. Did y'all notice how this kind of has the like the rhythm of like a, I don't want to say a sea shanty because I don't really know much about sea shanties.
Oh, I know sea shanties.
But like, you know, like how SpongeBob SquarePants' like song feels like a sea shanty, like the, yeah, like, who lives in a pineapple under the sea, so it's don't. It feels like you should be going like this while you're, you know. Yeah, you should be going like this as you sing it. That's how I feel kind of as I'm, but this one starts to take on a rhythm very early on where I don't feel like I should be going like this. I feel like I should be stomping my foot on the deck of a ship. Like, that's how it feels. Like, after a certain point, like I'm holding a beer in a giant glass mug and I'm stomping on the deck of a ship. Like, as I'm listening to this. That's how it feels. Like, I can't remember exactly what part, but it definitely comes early on. Bless you, bless you, bless you. I said it the most times, bless you. You can't beat me. If it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing. Sneeze more. Let's see. He says here, and I guess you could read this part, like, it's got that footnote down below that, like, talks about how Coleridge thinks that there are as many invisible natures in the world as there are visible natures. Honestly, I think he's thinking of something akin to, like, the Upside Down, where it's like another reality right on top of our own that's happening, and there's, like, things in it that we can't see. That he sort of uses as kind of the basis behind this. And he's not talking like God and the angels and stuff specifically. I think he's talking about there's just maybe gods or demons that exist in the air around us and we just can't see them and they affect things and how they work. I don't know if he necessarily believes that himself, but he's writing a poem about it. And it says, in beginning, it is an ancient mariner and he stoppeth one of 3. By thy long grey beard and glittering eye, now wherefore stoppest thou me? Y'all know that wherefore means why, right? When you say wherefore, like, wherefore thou stoppest me means why. Kind of like whither means where. And he says, the bridegroom's doors are open wide, and I am next of kin. The guests are met, the feast is set, mayst hear the merry din. So he's like, why? I am going to a wedding, why are you stopping me? Old mariner. And he holds him with his skinny hand. There was a ship, quoth he. Hold off, unhand me, greybeard loon. He sounds so effective. Eftsoons his hand dropped he. He holds him with his glittering eye. The wedding guest stood still, and listens like a 3 years child. The mariner hath his will. The wedding guest sat on a stone. He cannot choose but hear, and thus spake on that ancient man, the bright-eyed mariner. The ship was cheered, the harbour cheered, merrily did we drop. Below the kirk, below the hill, below the lighthouse top. The sun came up upon the left, out of the sea came he. Then he shone bright, and on the right went down into the sea. Higher and higher every day, till over the mast at noon. The wedding guest here beat his breast, for he heard the loud bassoon. I don't really know what the bassoon would be playing. Y'all know what a bassoon is, right? It's like a giant clarinet played with like a little pipe and a tiny reed. It would go like woo, kind of has like a woo sound. But he starts beating his chest along with the story. So I guess that's why I get like the idea of like stomping on the floor of a ship. The bride hath pierced into the hall, red as a rose is she. Nodding their heads before her goes the merry minstrelsy. Like that's how I get doom, doom. The whole rest of the poem is just, that's playing in my head because I feel like it never stops. And so that sort of is the idea of like what starts coming. And the whole thing feels like a farce. It feels completely put on. It doesn't feel to me realistic. It feels like it's meant to seem kind of fake and put on and magical and mystical. And honestly, I don't think, as somebody mentioned, and I don't mind this comparison as much because people don't make it that often. May have been Crystal, can't remember. But somebody mentioned Pirates of the Caribbean. Was that Crystal or somebody else? Jane mentioned Pirates of the Caribbean. So yeah, Pirates of the Caribbean. I literally don't. This is how strongly I feel like we would not even have Pirates of the Caribbean if it wasn't for this. Like I feel like this sort of sets like that idea of like there being sort of like almost like magical voodoo type magics and unseen things that exist, and then like we have these grizzled pirates. And I mean, the first thing I think when all those people died on that ship and it's just him left alive is that the ship is cursed, and I'm thinking of the curse of the Black Pearl, and like they're all dead and on the ship, and they're like the dead people are moving the ship. That's the first thing I think is that. And I don't know, I feel like the other thing people often say about this poem when they start talking about it is that, that besides just the mystical quality of it, is two things. One, I don't think y'all really said, but what was the point? Like, what was the point of all this? And two is, it doesn't seem fair. Like, what happens? Like, this jackass shoots an albatross, and so what happens?
He lives.
He lives.
Everyone
else in the ship dies. It's like, what? And you could argue that they're being punished because they hung the albatross around his neck as punishment afterwards. And I don't remember who said this, but somebody said, oh, isn't there a song about like an albatross and it's like a burden? But the whole idea of an albatross being a burden like came from this. Like it didn't exist before this. But yeah, it doesn't seem like it follows like the rules of fairness and things that we would expect to happen. And I think that that's kind of the hallmark of this poem, is that it has that feeling. Did y'all feel like the same way? Like why is any of this stuff happening? Why does it seem like he's subject to this? I mean, we got the two like ethereal beings arguing over his soul at one point. Part of me thinks that essentially one of them, like they don't value the sanctity of human life so much that they just went, look at that guy, he shot a bird for no reason. Let's teach him a lesson. And they don't really care about people's lives, so they're just like, let's kill all these people around him so it makes it harder on him. Because that probably is a worse punishment than death. In terms of like the living world. I mean, would you, I don't know. It's like you say to somebody like, you know, I could kill you or I could kill your entire family and everybody who's blood related to you within like 3 generations. You'd be like, I guess kill me. That would suck. I would hate to have all of my friends and family die. But then like they go the other way and they leave you alive and kill all of them. And you're just like, that's gotta suck. Like all the people you know and love are gone. So it doesn't seem fair, but it might be the most effective form of punishment to beings that don't care about human life. So I actually kind of think that it's appropriate. I think when we get to the end, though, there was a lady who expressed a similar sentiment, and he had like something to say specifically to her. It said that Coleridge said in 1830, answering the objection of the poet Anna Barbauld, actually it could be Anna Barbald, I don't really know, that the poem, she said, like, this poem lacks a moral. Like, what are we supposed to get out of it? Like, at the end, we're just told that he feels he's now compelled to tell this story to everybody. He's, like, suddenly, like, the urge to tell this story again pops up in him, and he has to tell some, like, stop and tell whoever the person is right next to him. And that's what happens, essentially, to the bridegroom at the beginning, or the wedding guest. And this lady said, I don't get it. Like, I mean, he just happens to kill this bird, and now he's forced to tell this story for all eternity. It doesn't make any sense. And he said, I told her that in my own judgment the poem had too much of a moral, and that the only or chief fault, if I might say so, was the obtrusion of the moral sentiment so openly on the reader as a principle or cause of action, a work of pure imagination. See, he says here, like right near the end, he kind of, I always feel this feels forced in. I don't think he would have included this had somebody not made him or asked him to. But he says, farewell, 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 but this I tell to thee, thou wedding guest. He prayeth well, who loveth well, both man and bird and beast. So basically it says that you to love man, also love bird, also love animals. And he says, he prayeth best, who loveth best, all things both great and small, for the dear God who loveth us, he made and loveth all. So he's like, we should not kill animals. That's what he's being punished for, is the killing of an animal. Like, why did he do it? Just for sport? No, it's silly. You can't do that. It's wrong. And he felt that that was quite obvious at the end, and he would have preferred it not be there at all. So I don't know that you could actually use that as one of your, I want to write my paper about animal rights research papers, because I don't think that that's necessarily what he's really feeling here. It's just something that feels sort of forced, and it only appears at the very end, because he also says, love both great and small, God loveth us, made and loveth all. Yet if that's true, then God allowed all those people on that ship to get killed because of a bird, and that doesn't make much sense either. But he went like one that hath been stunned, and is of sense forlorn a sadder, and a wiser man he rose the morrow morn. But I like what he says in the comparison to Anna Barbeau after that. Like when he says there's too much of a moral. He says this is how he would have preferred it been, and I actually feel like it kind of is this way. He says it ought to have had no more moral than the Arabian Nights tale of the merchant sitting down to eat dates by the side of a well, and he throws the shells aside. He's like sitting next to a well, and he's eating some dates, and these are good, and let's just throw the shells aside. So he throws them like down the well or whatever. And when he throws a shell down a well, a genie pops out of the well and says, I have to kill you. He's like, what? I have to kill you. You've been throwing shells into this well, and one of the shells put out one of the eyes of my child. Like one of these little shells went down to the bottom of this well where me and my son are staying, and it hit my son in the eye, and now he's blind in one eye. I have to kill you. And he says that's how he'd prefer the tale to come off, this whole Rime of the Ancient Mariner, is that sometimes it's not even, like terrible things happen and not really for a reason. That's just the nature of the universe. Crappy things happen and there's really nothing you can do about it. Kind of like I was talking the other day with the dude who goes to college, gets a degree in law between Britain and the European Union, and then they sever that relationship, and he's done everything right, yet now he has a useless degree. He could probably work as still a clerk and still have some, I'm sure there's some crossover, but like the whole purpose of his degree was to have that particular job. And now he's going to have to sort of settle for something else. You know, and a lot of times, like, like good people have family members die of like cancer and things, and it's not, of course, anything they did. Cancer is just so random. Like, it doesn't pick only the bad people. And I think that that's sort of what he was getting at, is that bad things happen sort of at random in the universe. So he feels like there might, maybe, be some sort of invisible natures that we can't see that are moving things in pieces for reasons we don't know. I think we these days would just call that chance. Do you feel like things randomly bad happen to you? It's probably mostly your fault.
Someone just robbed you at gunpoint. Oh, it's your fault that you're getting robbed.
No, I'm actually very much on the other side of those sorts of things. I'm not one of the people in society who is the victim blamer type of people. I don't blame victims, especially when it comes to those sorts of situations. So. another case for why I think he's this way. By the way, to Wordsworth, we can basically sum up as saying that he writes a poem to Wordsworth. They kind of had a falling out at one point. They weren't great friends for a while. Believe it or not, they lived so close to each other and spent so much time together that for some reason the people in the town thought that they were some sort of government spies spying for some other country. So when it was time to renew the lease on like the place that he was staying, the lease was denied, and they ended up moving apart. But it was one of like the greatest periods of poetic activity for either one of them, Wordsworth and Coleridge. So people being suspicious of spies kind of ruined everything. Which is interesting. So I remember something I was going to try to make today, like a thing. Let me see. Epitaph, I think, is important to look at because it's sort of the last case that I have for Coleridge just kind of liking to mess with people. And it's one of the reasons I don't let people write about this anymore is because almost everybody gets this wrong, at least to me. And I just kind of remove the possibility of me disagreeing with everybody because I have a particular take on this poem. You know what an epitaph is?
It's what's written about a dead person.
Yeah, written about a dead person. Usually it appears on their tombstone, I believe, if that's correct. It literally doesn't say that in the note. It just says, like, he wrote this about himself a year before he died. I don't know whether or not it appears on his tombstone. But this poem goes, and I can actually pull this one up, and I have, I think. It's very short, see? It's meant to appear like on a tombstone. He died July 25th, 1834. Oh. I mean, everybody's got to die sometime. I don't know why I'm sad about that.
What is it, your birthday?
Huh? I mean, it very well could be. It's in July.
It's not. Yours is the 28th.
Yeah, we know. We know your birthday.
There are multiple people online
Yeah, but
with that birthday.
Here.
Huh?
Not that we're here. Maybe.
How would my birthday be given by working here? Anyways. But that doesn't make any sense because July 28th is a...
Can't logic your way out of it and just solidly.
That's a Sunday, but my wife told me that my birthday was on a Tuesday. Anyways. Stop, Christian passerby. Stop, child of God. And read with gentle breast. Okay? So he's asking us to stop at his tombstone. He says, beneath this sod, a poet lies, or that which once seemed he. Oh, lift one thought in prayer for STC, that's his initials, that he who many a year with toil of breath found death in life may here find life in death. Mercy for praise, to be forgiven for fame, he asked and hoped through Christ, do thou the same. I think this is bullcrap. I think it's complete and total bullcrap. Because he says, stop, Christian passerby, right? So he says, person who's walking by, stop, because he wants attention. And he says, stop, child of God, which he then starts to try to, I guess, appeal to them, not just like, hey, stop and read what I've written. He's like, stop, child of God. He makes it about like God now. And he says, and read with gentle breast. So be kind when you read this. And he says, beneath this sod, and I don't know, I've always thought when people say like they're beneath sod, I don't know, when you say like something sod, there's a forced humility there. I don't know, there's something about that particular calling grass that. There's like a forced humility. It has like sounds like the word clod, like a clod of dirt, and like that's, I don't know, like I always feel like that to me is forced humility that's not really there. And he says, beneath this sod a poet lies, or that which once seemed he. I mean, just, come on, just say you're a poet. He said he's a poet already. And he said, or that which once seemed he, like he's trying to be forced humble again. Like he's like, oh, maybe I just seemed like I was a poet. I was not a true poet in the sense of that. Yeah, whatever, you were a poet. It's like, you know that when people were great at something and they say, oh, but I'm not really that good at it at all. And you're just like, shut up, you're good at it and you know it, and quit trying to like pretend like you're not. You know, there's like people who do that sometimes. Like, that's almost as annoying as just saying that you're good at it, I feel. So, like, you know you're a poet. And I think that there's a double meaning here in the word lies. By the way, I'm not giving you anything you could do for critical analysis, because why?
Because we can't read words.
Yeah, that's right. So it says lies. So this could mean that the poet lies underneath the ground, of course, in the literal sense. It could also mean the poet is lying to us, still from the grave, which I like to think. And he says, oh, lift one thought in prayer for STC. Like, that's all I want is just one thought and pray for me. And he said that, and I think this part's actually legit. He said, he who many a year with toil of breath found death in life may here find life in death. I think the type of life he's talking about is a little debatable, but I think he really did find toil in life. Like, it was a hard life for Coleridge, because he was constantly in ill health and he was constantly being accused of plagiarism for having done it. So it was kind of rough. He wasn't like the most blessed person. I think Wordsworth generally didn't have many problems. I think that's one of the reasons Percy Shelley writes a poem to Wordsworth where, while Coleridge is like, I'm glad that we essentially got over our problems near the end. You wrote what a great poem, and I loved it. Percy Shelley was like, Wordsworth, you were so great in the beginning, and you told us about Tintern Abbey and like memories being gone. And since your politics have become a little too extreme. What often happens when people have a pleasant life and it stays pleasant and never gets less pleasant is they do the types of things that guarantee they continue to have a pleasant life. And I think Wordsworth's politics sort of started going fascist toward the end. Like, he started thinking people aren't capable of being smart enough to govern themselves anyway, so they should just be governed by somebody who is smarter and more capable and has the authority to do so. Basically looking down at little people. And I think that Wordsworth, because he never really had to deal with many problems, I think that was one of the reasons he ended up having that viewpoint. It's a pretty extreme and bad viewpoint. It's essentially fascism. Like, for example, like, I always consider like let's say Hitler only represented the thoughts of, like, say 5 to 10% of the population, yet he's the one in control. But somebody's like, well, but somebody who's part of that party thinks not, oh, this sucks because the vast majority of people's what they want is not happening. So we should really change this. That person would be like, well, we're getting the right results, even if the method's not the best, so what does it matter? That's kind of, I guess, more on what Wordsworth was saying. As long as we get the right results, because people aren't capable of doing that on their own, it's fine. But anyways, so his life was always kind of tough compared to Wordsworth's. And he says, may here find life in death. Well, I think he's acting as though he wants mercy instead of praise, and he wants to be forgiven instead of have fame, and he's asking and hoping through Christ. And he's saying, do the same for yourself. And that's the life and death that he wants, is to be given mercy from God and also be forgiven by God. I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think there's a double meaning here. When I read this, I see may find life and death. I think the kind of life and death being remembered and having us talk about him many, many, many years later because he's famous for being a poet. Because he says, because this book here says for in the sense of instead of. And I was like, but what if we just read it literally? Where we give him mercy for the praise that he wants. And we forgive him for the fame that he wants. Not like instead of, but literally just he wants it. He wants praise. He wants fame. And just please give me mercy and forgiveness for that. He asks and hope through Christ. And he says, do thou the same. So he's asking somebody to stop, read this, and then quickly move on. So he's really asking everybody to stop. Everybody from here onward. So I feel like this is a poem that is falsely humble, where he still wants to be considered a poet. And there's this false humility there. Because it fits with everything else he's written to me. But it's my last thing about Coleridge. Any questions? Comments?
Questions on the footnotes?
Probably everything I just said. Or at least parts of what I said. I'm sure there won't be any stuff on Hitler.
I just meant like the story.
Oh yeah, I think that because all the ones that appear, I generally try to have a question, at least one question about, even if they're in blue. I already think I told you everything you need to know about to Wordsworth. Then we have Lord Byron. We're not doing Childe Harold, we're doing Don Juan. Guys, Don Juan. I've always wanted to, it's one of the things that like, I don't have time to read, unfortunately, like for fun. I can only read the stuff I have to do for class over and over again. But if I had time to read for fun, maybe I read like 1 or 2 sci-fi books a year, like 1 in the summer and 1 at Christmas, and that's about it. I love sci-fi and I get to read like 2 books a year. But Don Juan, we'll just pull up Don Juan so I have a place marker on the thing. Don Juan, oh, how about Canto 1?
Don Juan better. Don Juan, Canto 1.
And it's gonna, what's genius.com? Has anybody been there before?
He's into genius.
It's gonna have some giant bar at the top, isn't it? Lyrics? I don't know. I think that's a song, apparently. Poetry Foundation. I've gotten to where I really just don't like Poetry Foundation. Because it's very annoying to look at. If I can usually avoid it, I try. The British Library. I was going to say a read about. I don't want to read about it. I want to read it. Full text. Bless you. You're welcome. It's all me. I'm the blesser. Sounds ridiculous. Make this a little smaller. Don Juan. Oh, that's a nice page. Canto the First. So there's a lot of cantos to this. There's all the way through the 17th. And I've only ever read the first. By the way, do not write any of your essays about any parts of Don Juan other than the Canto 1, because we didn't read those other ones. I always have people do that. They're like, yeah, I love this part of it, and I'm like, we didn't read that. So rewrite the whole thing. Oh, I wish we had stanza numbers. That would be helpful. But Don Juan. This was actually written, it says on the back of the poet's copy of Canto 1, so this is considered the... Oh, it doesn't even have it. Oh. So Canto 1, in the book, you actually had something slightly before this, I want a hero and uncommon want. So I'm going to read that thing that came before, which you, I guess, can't see. Let me see. Maybe I can. I would to heaven that I were so much clay. Headpiece to Don Juan. It's still on Genius. What is up with this Genius thing? Is it going to have like notes if you highlight it? Oh, yeah. Whatever. So he says, I really don't like this website. No, that was me. Poem Hunter. Okay, at least I've got some text. Whatever. So this is what appeared on the back of the copy of Canto 1, and people have said, okay, well, I guess this was meant to be like a fragment that starts off the poem. And it's supposed to be the poet himself, not necessarily Byron, but the poet's, the guy who wrote this story, the character, because it's not really necessarily Byron. It's a character construction that tells us this whole story. And it starts off, you know, as many poems, it seems, would start off as sort of like a mission statement. Like these old great epic poems would have like a mission statement. So here's his mission statement, usually very clearly outlined, tells us exactly what's coming. Here it is. It sounds very grandiose, I think, as well. You know what grandiose is? Like it's important. It has a sense of its own importance, okay? I would to heaven that I were so much clay. Why did it move on to something else?
Sorry.
Like it literally, like it stopped. It did read it out loud, and I just wasn't listening. Oh, I think it did.
Wow.
What is happening?
I don't know.
There's an ad. Stop the ad. No autoplay. Apparently there's a video going on above, and there's a Chevy ad down below. Like, what is this website? So I'm reading from the book, not that stupid thing. Huh?
And you're using cookies.
I am. Where to say that? Did it ask me and I said yes?
Continue to use our site. You said how you use the cookies. To learn more, click here.
What is? Oh, let's say yes, but I don't even know what cookies are.
They're viruses.
It's how the government keeps watch.
Fair enough.
They're like little viruses. Every website asks you if you want a virus on your computer, and you say yes.
Wait, for real?
It's actually, it's not, it's kind of like that a little bit. It's really just like, cookies are like, they gather information about your computer when you go to the website that it remembers, so that every time you go back there, it loads faster. But we have such fast internet speeds, there's really no reason to have cookies. It'll all load up pretty fast anyway. So, I mean, the fact that it's just them wanting to know more about us. That's what their cookies do. It's kind of like, here's how it sort of is. It's like if somebody gave you a cookie, and that cookie had little trackers in them, and you ate the cookie, and then it sort of always had trackers in your blood. Except it's not quite so robust as that, what I just said. It's like every time you show up, it's like it recognizes you now. It's like, hey, buddy. Although for some reason, they always ask if you want the cookies, even if they're already doing the cookies. I'm so tired of the cookies. Okay. So he starts out very, very important here. I would to heaven that I were so much clay, as I am blood, bone, marrow, passion, feeling, because at least the past were passed away, and for the future, but I write this reeling, having got exceedingly drunk today, so that seemed to stand upon the ceiling. I say, the future is a serious matter. Oh, for God's sake. Hawk and soda water. That's how the poem starts off. And hawk and soda water, I believe, is supposed to like get rid of a hangover. Is that what it says? A white Rhine wine. So he's trying to do the hair of the dog trick. He's like drunk, and he's starting to feel a hangover, so he asks for more alcohol so he can not realize he's drunk. Or he's having a hangover. This is the hair of the dog that bit you method of trying to get over a hangover. Like, how do you get over a hangover? Get so drunk that you don't feel the hangover, which is like going to cause its own hangover later. It's all stupid. So this is like him trying to sound like he's saying important things, and then all of a sudden gets so distracted by his hangover and his drunkenness that he just yells out for a servant. And that's the mission statement for the poem. And that's sort of how the whole poem goes. It sounds like he's moving somewhere important the whole time, and then he always just ends up either making jokes or saying almost nothing of importance. In fact, one of my favorite stanzas later is him talking about the meaning of life. Comes kind of near the end. Where's that thing where I drew like the weird bubble around it? In stanza 133, which I don't have available at the moment. Let's see, how about I do Control F and then I say man a phenomenon. There it is. Oh, that's a mistake in the text. So this is the stanza 133. He says, as he's trying to sound like something really important here, he says, man's a phenomenon, one knows not what, and wonderful beyond all wondrous measure. 'Tis pity, though, in this sublime world that pleasure's a sin, and sometimes sin's a pleasure. Few mortals know what end they would be at, but whether glory, power, or love, or treasure, the path is through perplexing ways, and when the goal is gained, we die, you know? And then, what then? I do not know, no more do you, and so good night. Return we to our story. So he sounds like he's going to say something compelling about like the meaning of life and what all this means.
Something deep.
And then he gets like, what, like, where was I going with this? Who the hell cares? Let's keep going. Like he can't say the deep thing. And that's how sort of this whole poem goes, is every time it sounds like it's saying something important about humanity, you realize it's a joke or a mislead. This is phenomenal. Man's a phenomenon, and so is this. No? Okay. So for those who didn't quite understand the story of what's happening, I think it's important to know that, like, I want to know what is Don Juan, the hero of our story? Because he does say at the beginning here, I want a hero, an uncommon want. Oh gosh. He says, I want a hero, an uncommon want. When every year and month sends forth a new one, till after cloying the gazettes with cant, the age discovers he is not the true one. Of such as these I should not care to vaunt. I'll therefore take our ancient friend Don Juan. We've all seen him in the pantomime, sent to the devil somewhat ere his time. So what he has here is Don Juan, who is supposed to be like the hero of the age, essentially. That's what his whole reasoning behind this is. But anybody happen to notice something strange about Don Juan and like him as a hero? Like what did Don Juan do, like heroically, in the story? Like what were his heroic actions? What were any actions? Who is Don Juan? It's Don. False. That's wrong. Incorrect. Sounds like I have some things to tell you. So Don Juan. It starts off with basically Don Juan doesn't really do much. A lot of things happen to him. He doesn't seem to do much on his own. Like he sort of is a very reactionary kind of guy. We think of heroes as what? They go save the day. Don Juan's not really like that. Things sort of happen around him as he's just sort of subject to them. We don't really see him doing much on his own, but reacting to things. And granted, heroes can be reactionary. Like there's a problem, we must solve it. But a hero, we need to act, right? We need a hero to make some decision and then save everybody based on that decision that they make. He more or less just, in the moment something happens and he's got to deal with it. It's not really like he's the one doing the acting on the stage. So basically it starts out with Don, who is it? Don Jose, I'm sorry, probably Don Jose, and the Donna Inez were his mom and dad, and it starts there, talking about the mom and dad. And it said that they had a very interesting marriage. In stanza 26, Don Jose and Donna Inez led for some time an unhappy sort of life, wishing each other not divorced, but dead. This sounds nice, doesn't it? A relationship where you wish, not that you were divorced from that person, no. I wish that person was dead. Margaret? And so there's sort of like, she's a wonderful woman. It says that she kept a journal in stanza 28. It says she kept a journal where his faults were noted. As any good wife would. Anything that she feels is wrong with him, she writes down and has like a little book of his faults. Ladies, if y'all ever want to make a relationship wonderful, just have a book where you write down all your man's faults or woman's faults or whoever you're in a relationship with. Write down their faults. On Reddit, there's a subreddit for this, and it's called, well, I can't say the word, but it's crappy. But the other word for crappy that starts with an S. Life pro tips. So like really just bad life tips you can give people. One of those would be like write down the faults of all of the person that you're supposed to love. So she's writing down all these things he's always ever done wrong, and they're sort of building a case for divorce. Everybody's getting excited because legal cases were a form of entertainment back then. And then it says, the lawyers did their utmost for divorce, but scarce a fee was paid on either side before, unluckily, Don Jose died. So, like, they were going to get divorced. There was going to be a nice big divorce case in the town. It was going to be so much fun to watch. You know, like when somebody was going to get hung and now they're not getting hung. And so now there's nothing to watch downtown. Like, damn it, we were going to get to see a hanging. And there was like they actually had like stadium seating sometimes set up for hangings. Like bench seating for like a baseball game. You know, like with the so you gotta move over. I want to see this guy die. Because there wasn't a whole lot to like watch on TV at the time since it didn't exist. So it says, but unluckily, John Jose died. He died, and most unluckily because, according to all hints I could collect from counsel learned in those kind of laws, his death contrived to spoil a charming cause. 1,000 pities also respect to public feeling, which on this occasion was manifested in a great sensation. Everybody was really sad the court case wasn't going to happen because it was going to be so dramatic, and so many things were going to happen. It'd be so much fun to watch, and it didn't happen. So basically, what ends up happening is Juan is the sole heir to Jose's like fortune. Donna Inez, as a woman, cannot really inherit it, but she can kind of direct what's done with it until Juan does inherit it. So she's in charge of his upbringing. She's a very strict woman. She wanted him to learn all kinds of wonderful education. She wanted to learn history, math, sciences, everything. Excepting a couple of things. And she also wanted him to learn soldier craft, like the art of being a soldier. However, it does say here at the end of stanza 38, he learned the arts of riding, fencing, gunnery, and how to scale a fortress or a nunnery. The writer here acknowledging that if you learn how to scale the side of a building, while that might be intended to be a fortress, you may also be simultaneously learning how to scale the walls of a nunnery where there are not but women inside who don't see men. And that skill works either way. You know, it's like, I mean, I'm sure there's some skill that like somebody wanted you to learn once upon a time. Maybe not you specifically, but somebody maybe in the room has learned some skill where you realize that skill has applications other than that. I mean, I'm thinking of like Breaking Bad, where like he's a chemistry teacher. He's one brilliant chemist, and then he just that chemistry. Well, it also can teach you how to make drugs because you know what to do with chemicals and how to make them. It's like, yes, the proper skill is there, but also the skill to do the other things with it is there as well. And it says, that which Donna Inez most desired and saw unto herself each day before all the learned tutors for whom she hired was that his breeding should be strictly moral. Much into all his studies she inquired, and so that they were submitted first to her. Any lessons that were going to be taught to him that day were submitted to her first. She would go over them. All arts, sciences, and no branch was made a mystery to Juan's eyes. She wanted him to learn everything, with the exception of natural history. Does anybody know what natural history is in this context?
Yeah.
Geology.
Huh?
Like geology.
That's actually close. It's actually like anatomy and physiology.
Oh.
Like the history of the natural form, essentially. So she didn't want him to learn anatomy, physiology. They might want to guess why. She wanted his being, he wanted to have a strictly moral upbringing, so she wanted, yeah, she doesn't want him knowing anything about parts or how to get busy. And it says here when they were doing the languages, especially the dead ones, the sciences, and most of all the abstruse, the arts, at least as such, could be said to be the most remote from common use. In all these he was much and deeply read, but not a page of anything that's loose, meaning of morals, or hence continuation of the species, was ever suffered, lest he should grow vicious, and it means vicious, like he should develop a vice for sexual stuff. So he never even learned about procreation, how that even works, not even for animals. His classic studies made a little puzzle because of filthy loves of gods and goddesses. So when he was learning mythology and stuff, like he had to learn mythology without sex, which I guess we figure out how to do when we're little kids, right? The teachers are always like, and then Zeus had another, and if every kid ever said, how does he have so many kids by so many people?
Cows.
And he'd be like, how do I not say he raped a lot of people? Well,
Girls.
he just made little other gods and things. He just made them, you know. So it says, who in the earlier ages made a bust? I mean, there was like Zeus freaking. I think one time he like turned into a swan, and then raped Leda as a swan. Zeus was really into just like experimenting with all kinds of different possibilities. He just
One of his people have like a half bull thing.
maybe. See, I don't know a whole lot about mythology. I know
A
some.
half bull because
Yeah.
she has
We
the.
literally read the story.
So he made that child.
In here?
half bull.
Yeah. It was the one with the maze.
I remember Miss
And
Ford.
then the guy that was under the castle, like drowned. It's Ezekiel? No, the guys, the dad and the son that like try to fly for the
Icarus.
Yeah.
Okay, so I only know the Icarus part, not the Minotaur part. So she tried to teach him everything except the sexual stuff. She said, but never put on pantaloons. Who in the earlier made a bustle, but never put on pantaloons or bodices. His reverend tutors had at times a tussle, and for their Aeneads, Iliads, and Odysseys were forced to make an odd sort of apology, for Donna Inez dreaded the mythology because it was all sex stuff. He was like, so how did we know this? And he's like, well, the teachers sort of had to dance around it. And then down below in stanza 52, he says, this sounds just like people, by the way. He says, for my part, after discussing exactly what he learned and the kind of things that he was taught by his tutors, the speaker of the poem says, for my part, I say nothing. But I will say this. My reasons are my own, that if I had an only son to put to school, as God be praised that I have none, 'tis not with Donna Inez I would shut him up to learn his catechism alone. No. I'd send him out betimes to college, for there it was I picked up my own knowledge. He makes a good, he says, just send them out and have them get their education from people who are learned in those things instead of curating every single thing a kid learns, because then you're cutting them off from maybe the stuff that would help make sense and you're creating some weird thing out of them. I like the sex education thing. If you don't, you'd be like, yes, I don't want my kid to learn what sex is. I'd prefer they just be taught abstinence, never condoms, never any of that stuff. That's all well and good, but you have more teen pregnancies that way, because then kids don't know how sex works and they're like, what happens if we do this? And like, that's how babies are made. And it's like, oh, okay. I would have rather have learned from a textbook than by experience, but now I know. Guess I'll raise this thing, and you'll pay child support.
Experience.
And then the parents are like, he shouldn't have his life ruined by one terrible mistake. Oh, why not? You're the one who chose how to educate him sexually. Baby's got to be cared for somehow. Next. So we have, he basically learns all this stuff and then is given no sexual education. And then one of his tutors, who is Donna Julia, she has a husband, Don Alfonso, who is, I believe, it says, wedded she was some years unto a man of 50, and such husbands are in plenty. And yet I think such of a one 'twere better to have two of 5 and 20. Ladies, even of the most uneasy virtue, prefer a spouse whose age is short of 30. So basically, she was married off to this guy who was like 50 when she was like 17, 18-ish. So that kind of sucks. So then she becomes a tutor to Don Juan, who for a while it's fine. Like it's absolutely fine that it says, Juan she saw, and as a pretty child caressed him often. Because he was, like, you dote on a young child. Like, he's like a cute little boy, like, it's like my daughter. It's like I hold her and like, give me a hug, and like, I live for those moments. And as she gets older, I'm sure I'll be the same way. It's like, come sit with Dad, we'll watch Paw Patrol, which I still do now. Maybe she'll watch different things when she's older. Also, like, come sit by me on the couch and like have my arm around, my kid, just loving that. And it'd be the same too if it was like, say, a niece or something. And in this case, she's like a live-in tutor, so she's kind of like a nanny in a sense. So she's going to have that motherly instinct toward the kid as well. The difference between, like, say, a familial relationship, though, and this nanny-style relationship is that when he's like, say, a 13-year-old kid she's babysitting, and she's 20, and she's got a 50-year-old husband at home. As Jewin starts to grow from 13, and now she's 23 and he's 16, a lot of changes happen to the male body between 13 and 16. He's going to go from looking like this little skinny twerp of a young kid you just want to hug to looking incredibly muscular and reaching his full height. And that's what it says here. It says, such a thing might be quite innocently done in harmless style when she had 20 years and 13 he. But I am not so sure I should have smiled when he was 16, Julia 23. These few short years make wondrous alterations, particularly among sunburnt nations. He's saying like the places that have lots of sun, like say Spain, where like it's not just the pale skin of say Britain where he comes from. He's saying like people who have like a more golden tan complexion, by Caucasian standards, so that. I guess for some reason he feels like somebody gets even more beautiful and more adult looking over those few short years than say like a white kid does. And that's just his assessment. I'm not saying whether or not I feel that way, but that's what he says. And then like she starts realizing she's having feelings for him. She's like, oh, I'm feeling the attraction. So she goes to basically say, I can no longer be Jewin's tutor. I just can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. Not to say why, but she just wants to go tell Donna Inez. Where is it? She vowed she would never see Jewin more, and the next day paid a visit to his mother and looked extremely at the opening door, which by the Virgin's grace let in another. Grateful she was, and yet a little sore. Again it opens. It can be no other. 'Tis surely Jewin now. No, I'm afraid that night the Virgin was no further prayed. Because she went to go resign, and instead of Donna Inez opening the door to the house, it was Don Jewin. She's like standing at the steps, and she knocks, and she steps down a little bit, and who opens the door but, why, hello. Jewin's there, and she's like, yeah, I changed my mind. She now determined, and this is the Eve mistake. It says she now determined that a virtuous woman should rather face and overcome temptation. She says, I'll stay his tutor and God will love me more and appreciate me more if I am around this incredibly attractive young morsel of a man. And I just don't go through with my thoughts. Because that will vouchsafe my righteousness, is that if I can resist temptation, which we know from Paradise Lost is a terrible, terrible idea. I'm stupid. No. If I can resist the Satan, that's going to be. Just don't put yourself in the situation.
Getting out of it.
Yeah, and so he starts to sort of notice her as well. And then I love, he never really has times where he doesn't really do anything, you notice? Like, he's not pursuing her. It's mostly from her perspective that we're getting it, and she's the older one. And she's the one who comes up to the door. She's the one who has the thoughts and feelings. He's more or less just reacting. What now?
Circling in the Green Knight.
Yeah, it's kind of like that, except at least in Circling in the Green Knight, he gets the opportunity to resist. He's like, I'm going to resist, because that's what a knight would do. Whereas Jewin's like, I don't even know that what we're doing is bad. Nobody's ever told me about it. I'm having thoughts and feelings, and they're pretty nice. And it says here, when he started realizing sort of how beautiful she was, it says he thought about himself and the whole earth, of man the wonderful, and of the stars, and how the deuce they could ever have birth, because he doesn't know how sex works. And then he thought of earthquakes and of wars, how many miles the moon might have in girth. These are pretty heady, important, philosophical concepts in science. Of air balloons, and of the many bars to perfect knowledge of the boundless skies. He's really considering the universe. And then he thought of Donna Julia's eyes, because that's what he's really thinking about. It's like the only reason he's even thinking on these other things is because he's just so excited about the thought of Donna Julia that she makes him consider the whole universe. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. And it says, in thoughts like these, true wisdom may discern longings sublime and aspirations high, which some are born with, but the most part learn to plague themselves with all they know not why. 'Twas strange that one so young should thus concern his brain about the action of the sky. That's what the speaker is saying here. Do you think 'twas philosophy that this did? I can't help thinking puberty assisted. By the way, some of his rhymes are just brilliant. That philosophy that this did, I can't help thinking puberty assisted. That rhymes really well. He was like, he's not suddenly just curious about the nature of the world. He's just sort of enamored with a woman, and he's going through puberty, and he's like, so freaking funny. Where is it? I think I wrote "oh no" in the margins, wherever that is. It sort of gives us hint as to what's happening. Yeah, here's weird choices that the writer makes. I don't really understand. Like in stanza 104, it says, "'Twas on the 6th of June about the hour, 6:30, perhaps still nearer 7." Why is he so like? It's so weird to have a speaker who's unsure of things. He doesn't know, so he's just openly admitting and then he includes that as part of the rhyme. He's like, what time was it? I don't know. But anyways. So it says, "There were she and Jew in face to face. When two such faces are so, it twould be wise but very difficult to shut their eyes." Like they should shut their eyes and just not look at each other to make them less tempted by each other. And then it says, "And Julia sate with Jewin, half embraced and half retiring from the glowing arm, which trembled like the bosom where 'twas placed. Yet still she must have thought there was no harm, or else 'twere easy withdraw her waist. Right? But then the situation had its charm, and then, oh, God knows what's next. I can't go on. I'm almost sorry that I ever begun," says the speaker. And it says, this is, so they start, they can't stop each other. I says, "And Julia," there are little moments of brilliance in here by the speaker, which it means that sometimes he's trying to do something important and can't. And then sometimes he accidentally says something important that really is pretty profound out of nowhere. But it's just part of some other thing he's saying. He says, "And Julia's voice was lost except in sighs, until too late for useful conversation. Tears were gushing from her gentle eyes. I wish indeed they had not had occasion. But who, alas, can love and then be wise?" And he just throws that line in there. But isn't that brilliant? Who, alas, can love and then be wise? Like, who can fall in love and then go, let's have wisdom kick in at this exact moment that I've fallen in love? No, it's like that Shakespeare poem that we read where it was, "Thou art black as black as hell, or dark as hell, or hot as hell." I can't remember. Dark as night. There you go. Black as hell, dark as night. Where it's essentially saying my reason will not kick in. It's like my stupid love feelings are keeping me attached. And he says, but everybody's like that. Who can love and then be, okay, now I'll let my wisdom kick in. You can't do it. The feelings override. And he says, "Not that remorse did not oppose temptation, and little still she strove, and much repented, and whispering, I will never consent, consented." She's like, "I will not consent, I will not consent, I will not consent," and then she already kind of had. It's like, no, and I'm doing it. It just kind of happened. And it says, and then there was that man's a phenomenon bit that I was talking about. Let's see. "And then all of a sudden, after it happens, 'twas midnight, Donna Julia was in bed, sleeping most probably, when at her door arose a clatter might awake the dead if they had never been awoke before, and that they have been so well all have read, blah, blah, blah." Don Alfonso shows up with half the town to her bedroom and is says, "I can't tell how or why or what suspicion could enter into Don Alfonso's head, but for a cavalier of this condition, it surely was exceedingly ill-bred without a word of previous admonition to hold levee around his lady's bed." They all come in around the bed and summon lackeys armed with fire and sword, basically to prove himself the thing he most abhorred. He doesn't want to be somebody whose wife has cheated on him, but he's coming with all the town around him, around his wife's bed, to prove that he is being cheated on. It's a very weird thing. You'd hope that would remain private, but no, he wants to make it this weird public farce. And by the way, her maid Antonia, Donna Julia's maid Antonia, they're in her bed, and they've hidden Jewin in the sheets, and they're sort of laying half on top of him, Julia and Antonia. And then they all search the whole room. They search the whole thing down, and they find nothing, but they looked under the bed, never thought to look in it. And he's like, "You're cheating on me." And she said, I love the way he phrases this. He says, "In heaven's name, Don Alfonso, what do you mean?" Like, it has literally, it's written that way, like, what do ye mean? Like, you know, when somebody says something and they're obviously guilty, it's like, instead of like, what do you mean? It would be like, it's like, what do you mean? Like, you know, it sounds more guilty saying it like in that weird sort of snivelly, radish-like way. And he says, "I'm going to search the room." And then he doesn't look in the bed. And she's like sitting there. Well, he's in the bed, right? So Jewin's in the bed. They've had sex. Antonia's helping hide him. And the whole time they're searching around the room, Julia's doing this. She's like, "Yeah, search and search, insult on insult heap, and wrong on wrong. It was for this that I became a bride. For this in silence I have suffered long a husband like Alfonso at my side. But now I'll bear no more, nor here remain if there be law or lawyers in all Spain. Yes, Don Alfonso, husband now no more, ever indeed you deserve the name. Is it worthy of your years? You have 60, 50, 60, it's all the same. Is it wise or fitting, ceaseless to explore for facts against a virtuous woman's fame? Ungrateful, perjured, barbarous Don Alfonso, how dare you think your lady would go on so?" She has. Like, that's exactly what she's done. So she's like, it sounds like so legit, right? Like, he would be accused of having cheated on their husband by the husband. He's like, "You cheated on me." And he's like she's like going, no. You're crazy. You're a crazy. I'm going to tell everybody how crazy you are. I'm not a cheater. Look, you can't even prove that she. It's bull crap. And then, like, she did, though. Like, that's exactly what she did. Like, but it's like, you would definitely chew out the person who accused you of it if they couldn't produce the evidence that you did it, right? Oh my gosh, did y'all see? I don't know if I. So let's see. I don't actually sit and watch Twitch. It's like a curated thing for me. That's the thing that y'all do, right? Y'all watch Twitch and YouTube streams and Let's Plays and things like that. That's what your generation does.
No, the ones below us. Yeah.
The ones below you. Oh, that's what my daughter does. So I guess I was assuming y'all were closer in age to her. Let's see. So then he comes back and for some reason notices Jewin's shoes. Somehow he had missed those before. And then we have a struggle between Jewin and Don Alfonso. Remember, Jewin is 16 years old. He's trained in soldier arts. He kicks Don Alfonso's butt, and Jewin's totally naked at the time. Weird fight, but then Jewin gets out, escapes. Julia is sent to a nunnery, writes Jewin a letter. We don't even really get his response. Every single thing that seems in this story is less about Jewin and more about the people who are around him at the time. Like, we don't get a whole lot of, like, Jewin doing much of anything except reacting to stuff that happens to him, which is really weird. And then we sort of get the speaker's mission statement for the rest of the cantos. Like, he says, "I will have a whole bunch of cantos and they will be great and you'll love them." And he sort of insults other poets of the time, like right near the end, saying like, "Mine won't be like this," or like this other thing. And he's so playful with it. In the very last bit of this thing, he says, "Go, little book, from this my solitude. I cast thee on the waters. Go thy ways. And if, as I believe, thy vein be good, the world will find thee after many days. When Southey's read," some poet he didn't like, "and Wordsworth understood, I can't help putting in my claim to praise. The first four rhymes are Southey's every line. For God's sake, reader, take them not for mine." So his first 4 lines there, he steals from a guy named Southey and then says, "They're not my lines, so please don't think that I wrote them." But that's what he chooses to end his first installment with. He released these as installments, like they were, every canto was like, it was kind of like you would buy them separately. So it's like buying chapters of a book instead of the book all at once. So he would like pay for like a subscription kind of thing. It was pretty smart. But that's Don Jewin. And he ended up taking over sort of the public consciousness. He became famous from this. Byron himself is incredibly attractive, and he is sort of actually the basis for the idea of a vampire. You ever heard of vampires? You know, like, of course, but like not the twinkly ones, but like the old school, like they're dangerous, they rip you apart, but they're very brooding, and they're incredibly attractive and sexually No, not those. Sexually like promiscuous and like they try to bite people and turn them. Not the biting part, but every other idea of like a brooding person who was like incredibly attractive and draws your eye and like they're very like sexual, but they're also like weird with sex. That was all based on Byron, the character himself. Huh? Yeah, this is kind of like one of the first it's kind of like the basis for the idea of a telenovela. Very dramatic but the Byronic hero became like what this guy was known as, and also the Byronic narrator, somebody who is both outside of the joke but in on the joke at the same time, somebody who's assessing things but is also very ironically bad at assessing and humorous at the same time. He was he was very instrumental in like the way we tell stories. Okay, y'all have a good one.
All right, good to see you guys.
I like the shorter poems better.